In this episode,
When does ML-based signal engineering make sense?
A general rule that we've seen is like you want to get at least 10 conversions per campaign per day. You just be careful about hiding behind blended metrics, blended ROAS. Sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable as well. But again, in today's day and age, I think we can really focus on direct CAC.
My name is Jacob Rushvin, founder and CEO of Botsy and the host of Price Power, the podcast for subscription apps to grow their revenue. Today, we're talking with Shumel Lais. Shumel has spent 15 years immersed in performance marketing for consumer apps. He was the founder of Appsumer, which was acquired by InMobi, and is now building Day 30, a new solution in signal engineering for subscription apps. This episode goes deep in the tactics of performance marketing, signal engineering, mobile measurement maturity, and more.
Hey, Shumel, I'm super excited to have you here today on the podcast.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jacob.
We're going to dive into mobile measurement. We're going to talk about a lot of things on signal engineering. But first, can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in the mobile growth world?
Yeah, I've been in the space for quite a while now, since about 2010. Started my career agency side at an agency called Fetch. I think back then there was only a couple of mobile agencies. This was pre-MMP, pre-Facebook having ads on mobile. So yeah, started there.
Cool. Yeah, very early days before kind of the Facebook side, which dominates everything today. So, want to talk about mobile measurement maturity and how you evolved to more advanced strategies, and a super popular topic, which you are very well suited to speak about, is signal engineering. And I know Day 30 is built around this idea. And I was reading something you wrote, and I really like your description of choosing conversion events that better represent user value than what ad platforms can see on their own. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, how you landed on that framing of signal engineering and for Day 30?
Yeah, so I think the term signal engineering, I don't think I can take credit for coming up with that term. I think that was Thomas Petit and Eric. They've been kind of posting on the topic. But the concept of coming up with a predictive signal, that's kind of what we started looking into before that term kind of became popular. But in essence, it's the same thing. So what we are aware, we can see these ad platforms like Meta, they're becoming very algorithmic. So it's very, they're kind of taking away a lot of the controls that marketeers have, whereas historically you may be managing your bids and budgets and targeting, and they're really pushing you into this world of just like, give us your goal and we'll try and find the best users to reach that goal. So the topic of signal engineering is really like, how do we feed these ad platforms the best goal, especially in this iOS world where there's a limitation on how far visibility the ad platforms have. So if I take Meta as an example, they're typically limited to 7 days of visibility in terms of that goal event that you can send. But what marketers typically care about, or apps, subscription apps in particular, is usually something a lot further down funnel. So typically revenue or return on ad spend. And a lot of that doesn't materialize till outside of this window. So that's really where this topic of signal engineering comes in, of how can we find something that's better, correlates better to that longer term value that you're after, that the ad platforms otherwise couldn't see. So that's really kind of how we landed on that topic. And some of it came from historically from some past campaigns going back a few years ago, where I teamed up with a data scientist, and we ended up solving for this problem where there was just a delay in a user behavior. And that's when I got introduced into the world of machine learning and data science and how that could overcome that. So that was kind of where the idea stemmed from. But I think more recently, it's been kind of coined signal engineering, which I think is a pretty good name for it.
Yeah, got it. That makes sense. And so maybe you can dumb it down for me a bit. Like, what's like? Can you give me like a simple example of like what's actually happening here and how, like, some app, what an app is actually doing?
Yeah, so I think if we park kind of machine learning and data science for a second and just think at the most kind of basic level, signal engineering is really just the process of selecting an event or creating a conversion event. So you always start with what's the goal. So let's say our goal is a paying subscriber of an app. Let's assume there's a 30-day trial. Um, and that's what we're trying to bridge the gap to. So the status quo, what a lot of apps would go after is optimizing to a trial start event, because for anyone to become this paying subscriber, they would go through this trial first. So that's kind of the starting point. And then signal engineering is, can we find something better? So at the most basic level, you may find other behaviors that correlate with someone actually going on to subscribe. So if you let's say a language learning app, it could be the number of lessons that you completed. So could we do, start trial plus someone who's completed 5 lessons? That would be like a very basic example of how you could build, one output or a signal to the ad platform. So instead of just going for trials, go for people who do a trial and a behavior as well.
I've also heard people talking about like qualified trials where the user didn't cancel immediately in the first hour or something.
Yeah, and that's another really good example as well. And that works when you're almost like just purely trial focused as well. And then there's a question of how long do you want to wait or give for those trials to cancel? And certain apps you'll see like usually you find it with slightly younger demographic focus targeted apps where they're just very familiar with this ability to cancel immediately. So you see a big portion of those cancellations happening straight away. So that's where it works quite well. And then you've got some apps that are maybe have like a slightly longer user journey, and slightly more mature users who actually want to test the app. So you may not get as many of those cancellations early, but that's also a very good example of signal engineering at the most basic level.
Do you think like this concept of signal engineering is because of the trial? Because trial is essentially a low quality signal that because if people are buying direct and just purchasing, that's the highest quality signal, right? And so is it all kind of like this trying to get a proxy around this and is this mostly driven from that subscription model, but then also like platform limitations? Is that you think that's kind of the
Yeah,
genesis?
I think it's definitely driven by this kind of structural issue with attribution and the platform's visibility. And I don't think it's just limited to subscription apps. If anything, actually, I think this has been around a lot longer in the gaming space. And in gaming, there's a lot more variability. So it's not just has someone subscribed, yes or no. It's a case of how much value do I think they're going to be worth, or how many in-app tokens they're gonna spend. So there's a lot more to predict. So for subscriptions, trial is definitely an aspect, and I definitely agree. Like we also see people who have a mix of trial and non-trial or initial purchases as well. But typically, those initial purchases are shorter. So they're typically like weekly or monthly subscriptions. And even in that instance, they're offering those because they know over, 3 months or 4 months, those users are going to renew. And so again, there's still an opportunity for signal engineering there because there's still this gap of visibility. So yes, Meta could see that initial purchase, and that will probably be stronger than a start trial for users who do that. But there's still a difference between a user who renews only once or doesn't renew at all versus one that's still retained in 6 weeks or 12 weeks time.
Yeah. So regardless if it's just trials, because you're right. Yeah. A lot of times if you have a weekly plan, you may not offer a trial, but you're still trying to, understand and predict what is the true LTV of this user based on their attributes, based on what we see. Are they going to retain? What's their real value? And then it's also like the combination of different purchase types, upsells, and then sending the right signal for all of those. Where it's like if you're just sending out a trial start, do you combine that with your other purchase signal? How do you differentiate all that? And so it gets pretty complicated quick.
Yeah, so I think visibility is like one aspect of it. So you could argue, if you've got an app with a 3-day trial um, only, and then they convert, and it's only an annual plan, do you need signal engineering? There's an argument to say, does it fit within the 7 days? So that's where you have these other aspects of signal engineering, which is kind of plays to the specific requirements of the ad platform. So if I take Meta as an example, there's another variable which is signal volume. So not just signal accuracy of predicting future value, but also is it getting enough volume? So sometimes you might find actually you have visibility into purchases, or there's a really short trial, but the people who actually convert are only 20% of the people who start a trial. So all of a sudden you lose a lot of volume, and platforms like Meta still need that signal volume. So you're kind of balancing these two aspects, which I'd say the key aspects is the volume and then the precision side of it.
Got it. That's a good segue, because in your kind of signal framework, you talk about these 3 dimensions of precision, volume, and recall. And I know you, in one of your talks, you used, I think, a photo storage app example, and I think you're talking about optimizing towards heavy uploaders, improved precision a bit, but hurt recall or killed recall and excluded a third of future converters. So I think that's exactly what you're talking about, because you're saying then the ML based signal improved precision while keeping that recall. Tell me a little bit more about that and like how that got built.
Yeah, so I'll start with what recall is, and it's a fairly recent concept to me as well that I've come across over the past couple of years. So recall, the best way to think of it is, of everyone who actually converted or did your goal event, how many of those did your signal capture? So if you were purely optimizing to the trial event, and everyone has to do a trial to become a purchaser, then your recall for that event would be 100%, because anyone who converts would have had to do a start trial first. So from that perspective, that's one of the benefits of a start trial. When we talk earlier about some initial or early levels of signal engineering, so if I think of this photo storage app where they may look at how many photos were uploaded, and if you were to draw a line and say, okay, the people that converted on average, they did more than X number of photos, and you might draw a line to say it's 10,000 or 20,000 photos. The challenge with that is that can be quite a blunt tool sometimes. And that's where recall comes in, because there may be users who only uploaded 4,000 photos instead of 10,000, but they still converted. And because you have this hard cutoff, you miss a lot of those users. And so measuring recall as a metric, and it's quite a standard metric in data science, it just allows you to quantify how many people you're missing. And if you're missing too many, then that's when you can say, okay, maybe this isn't the best signal. Can I find something that doesn't exclude too many? And again, it's a trade-off between uplift in accuracy. You may say, actually, I don't mind losing a bit of recall because I know the people I am sending are really highly likely to convert.
Got it. So part of it is about, maybe you have some basic rule-based signal engineering, and then you can use kind of maybe some analysis or an ML layer to understand, is this a good signal? What is the loss here that we're seeing? And then that can give you an insight, is can we build a model around this? Is there a use case, or is it, no, actually this is pretty good, but it's working, we don't need to do anything else? But that's a good kind of early step to understand if there's opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'd say, like, with machine learning, if you've got enough data, there's always an opportunity to be a basic rule. And in essence, the way it works is, or in this example, if I kind of talk through the steps to get there, you start with having as much kind of behavioral data as possible. So it may be users who are doing certain behaviors inside the app, what buttons they're pressing, how many times they're doing certain actions. So all of these become inputs. And a lot of the times that data doesn't exist in an MMP. It's typically in your product analytics, like a mix panel or an amplitude. So it's really first ingesting all of that data. And the way these ML tools work, in essence, is it breaks these users into like A or B of converters and non-converters, and then it's looking for patterns within that. So a really simplistic way to think of it in one of the most simplest models is what we call a decision tree. And it will just work its way down for each level. So it may be, the first decision is trial people who cancelled in 1 hour and people who didn't, and then it would go underneath that, and it might find people who did a certain event and didn't have different conversion rates, and it will go down. It could differ by geo, and it will keep going down to find these like pockets or clusters of users who all share like similar characteristics, and then look at what are the conversion rates for those users.
Is the end state that you're sending back like you said, converted or not converted, or are you also sending in like revenue values of like a predicted LTV value?
Yeah. So you ultimately get a probability at a user level, and you can also apply that to revenue as well. So you have both, and that's also depending on what's the goal for the app, or also how much variability they have in revenue. So we typically find in subscription apps are probably slightly less variability. So a lot of the times a did convert or did not convert by the plan type that they started works really well. Whereas for something like gaming, the revenue value will work better because there's a lot more variability. But in essence, you get this output at a user level, and then you can decide if you want to fire those signals, yes or no, or if you also want to upweight or downweight the revenue, because you might see, some of these that are in gaming are considered like whales. So, do you want to normalize that slightly? Otherwise, Meta may spend tons of money just to go after those whales, and they may not convert. So it becomes a bit risky. So there's a bit of tuning that comes with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where the distribution of revenue, for a subscription app is like, we're getting 5% of people to pay, but they're all paying like similar ranges, right? At the end of the day, because we just need a certain level of return. If we're not, we don't have a good business. And so the variance in revenue, like, okay, if it's $30 versus $40 or $50, like, doesn't really matter to Meta. Like, that's not a big enough variance that it's really going to change the optimization. But when you have games with a super long tail of, some people spending a lot, people purchasing a lot more, then that kind of difference can be meaningful. Do you have like, it sounds like it's a bit more of an art. Is there, do you have simple like heuristics you use to go when it makes sense to send revenue, or when it makes sense just to send like a conversion or not?
Yeah, I think you almost want to try both
Okay.
because depending on the app, it could vary, but also like the budget the app has as well. Typically, the more budget you have, the more types of tests you can do. And same with the signal, because we talk about these probabilities for each user, and we talked about different levels of volume as well. So sometimes you may want to test multiple signals and see which one's yielding better results.
Got it. And so I think there was another example you shared about a restaurant booking. I think the team was optimizing on behaviors that correlated with bookings, but the performance didn't improve because I don't like the relationship wasn't actually causal. How do you? I mean, I think any semi-sophisticated marketer should kind of understand the difference between correlation and causation, or any student that went through basic stats class in school. But how do you, for people you're working with, how do you teach teams to kind of think about correlation versus causation? And because a lot of times we have to start with correlation, and
Yeah.
so it's like thinking about proving that causation. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so that restaurant booking app, that was a really interesting example. That's the one that actually got us into this like concept and idea. And I was the marketeer that was getting it wrong and optimizing to the wrong event before I met my co-founder, and he introduced me to some of these frameworks. So I think the first thing is having like clear measurement to begin with, just to be able to see if your campaigns are actually working or not, and driving a difference. And that's maybe something we'll get into. Um, and then the other is like this framework of back testing on data. So previously we would just look at, event like how many times did someone look on a restaurant page, like a specific restaurant page, versus how many times did they book. But what that missed was putting users into specific cohorts and defining observation windows to say, okay, this is the observation window of behavior. Let's say it's 24 hours. And then this is the window we're going to ask them to see if they did book. And then it's like a binary yes or no. So I think starting with that framework is a lot easier to back test and see, is this actually, does this event have a good precision and recall, which is that metrics that we would look at. So yeah, I think that's kind of how we learned about, or how I learned about this framework as a marketer. And that's what we're trying to help bring to the industry as well.
Yeah. And I think that's, common ML concept where you have the historical data. Let's build a model on half of it, and then try to verify on kind of the other half to see if kind of this is. But even so, like, we have we build a model. At the end of the day, like, there's only one real true way to prove causation is run it and see if it works, and run an experiment. And I think that's that's true whether you're running a simple A/B test, you're doing a correlation analysis to figure out an activation metric of, like, at the end of the day, it comes down to, like, experiments. Did this work? Or did it not? And I think we can get pretty close and pretty high confidence with our models. But you always got to launch it and see. And then also, once you never know what Facebook's going to do once you start sending signals to it, the black box of Facebook. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think maybe we did this backwards. We dived into kind of the complex concepts and dug in really. Let's take a step back from the beginning. I think that you have amazing insight kind of in your mobile growth, a career and experience with simple apps and large apps, helping lots of different types of companies. I want to kind of work through a progression of let's call it measurement maturity of where you get started for small apps, and then we'll slightly layer on more sophistication. So some people are old pros, some people are just getting started in the app world, and so maybe at a high level, what do you think about these stages? And let's focus on subscription apps for now. From where do you start, and then we can dive in. Actually, let's start with a small subscription app. Just launched. They've got a small team, limited budget. What's the minimum measurement setup they need before they kind of start spending money on paid UA?
Yeah. So whenever we do signal engineering, the first step is we always try and assess if people's measurements ready. So we do dozens of these audits, so it's given us a good understanding of, on different scale, kind of what we see, what people are starting with. So yeah, you definitely do see a pattern. And in terms of, maybe I'll start with how I see this measurement maturity evolving, and then we can look at if you're running paid ads, where should you really start? So when I speak to a lot of early stage folks, what they're doing, a lot of them don't even have an MMP in place yet. So again, an MMP is there to attribute when you have multiple sources to decide who gets credit for a specific user or behavior of that user. So a lot of the people just starting out, they don't have an MMP at all. They're ultimately taking the revenue from App Store Connect, or they may have a tool like RevenueCat or Adapty and so on in place. And then they're just comparing that revenue versus the spend. So I'd say that's kind of the most foundational, and you'll be surprised, we still see a lot of folks operating in that way. And that's how, at board level or for some investors, they may kind of look at it zoomed out. So I think that's the first step. I think then it evolves into the second step, which I'd say is platform-based attribution.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, go for it.
Is Do you need an MMP to get started? Where do you have simple rules that, like, the MMP value has changed a ton, right? And so maybe a quick direction of when you actually need an MMP, or when
Yeah.
you maybe can start with just the Facebook SDK or other simple
Yeah.
measurement setups.
Yeah, really good question, and it definitely comes up a lot. So I'd say, if you're serious about paid user acquisition, even if you're just starting out spending only, a few $100s a day or less, I would still advocate getting an MMP, and I'll kind of run through why. Um, and a lot of these MMPs do have these like free plans or free tiers as well, which normally include enough credits for people to get started. So I think what you said is definitely kind of right. The second stage of measurement maturity, I would say, is just having the Facebook SDK. And that can work quite well. Or if people are directing people through websites, you might just have a website pixel, or through the uh, Facebook conversion pixel, and so on. So I'd say that's a second aspect, and that might work well if you're just running on Facebook. But where it falls down, and where I think you really need an MMP, which is then I think takes you to the third level of measurement maturity, the biggest thing it misses is having cohorted visibility, or visibility on what is the user's value in 30 days or so on. So Meta, for example, their metrics are all based on the day of the event happen, not the day of the install. And they're a little bit sneaky like this, where they can end up just serving your ads to people who already have the app, or serve your ads to people who are already subscribed, and the renewal event is tagged into the purchase event. And all of a sudden they're claiming all these purchases when they're just users who are already subscribed and already renewing. So that's where an MMP, I think, can really help to differentiate between, what's actually driven from an install, which is why I'd always advocate it. And then you've got some aspects of, if you expand beyond Meta, if you're running Apple search ads and Meta, that's again another reason to have a third-party attribution tool. Again, it's not perfect; it's still based on last touch, so Apple search will still, cannibalize some of your Meta conversions, which is a topic in itself. So yes, I'd say that's why I would really advocate having an MMP for almost anyone running paid ads.
That's helpful. I think I've asked I asked a number of people this, and you're always curious to hear the responses, because kind of the value has changed, but that makes a lot of sense. Okay, all right. So once that baseline is live, you've got an MMP installed. What's next?
Yes, I'd say the next piece on the MMP, the other thing just to or the next level that I see a lot of apps aren't quite there yet, is understanding the difference between cohorted metrics and deliverables. So depending on the platforms, some of them by default will just show deliverables. So again, it's what revenue was generated today versus revenue from apps who installed today, as an example. So I think that's like a really key fundamental to get in place. So internally aligning, like when we talk about ROAS, like what is a cohorted day? Is it like day 7, day 30, day 60? Same with CAC or subscribers, because only then are you like comparing apples to apples. So I'd say that's kind of the next step. And then the last step on attribution is, or kind of level 5, is where you would look at media mix modeling or incrementality. And that's where you're ultimately adjusting for some of that cannibalization to really test like what's truly incremental. But I'd say, quite a few subscription apps are at that level of spend. Like that works when you've got 2 years of historical data. You're spending in, millions a month. That's where it can get there. So I still think last touch attribution can work really well if you understand the limitations of, it's really Apple search ads that becomes the main issue. So if you're aware that, targeting your brand terms is going to eat up some of your Facebook ad conversions, because there's a lot of users who will see an ad and then go and search for it later, then you're covered. So I think that's how I think of measurement maturity, like those 5 steps. And this is all, like, again, unrelated to signal engineering, but it's almost like a prerequisite. We want to kind of get to that level 3 or 4, which is having an MMP, before we even think of signal engineering, because only then it allows us to test it accurately.
is there a in the app space, MMP or media mix modeling and um, incrementality testing are definitely more advanced strategies. Let's say you need millions of dollars a month. What is the threshold for signal engineering when it makes sense to explore? And of course, signal engineering is a broad term, right? Like maybe we'll qualify says when does ML based signal engineering make sense?
Yeah. So I'd say one of the requirements of signal engineering, or if I double down a bit on meta, is where majority of people's spend is going. Um, there's this isn't like a definitive rule, but a general rule that we've seen is like you want to get at least 10 conversions per campaign per day. So that is what I would set as a starting point. And if your current trial starts aren't getting that, then you definitely don't want to be doing signal engineering because you're not hitting that threshold. And although 10 sounds like not a lot, sometimes depending on the markets that you're targeting, that cost per trial can be quite high. It can be from, $20 all the way up to $100, for example, depending especially if you're targeting the US. So if you multiply that by 10, all of a sudden, the spend starts increasing quite a lot. So that's where I would say spend is quite a big aspect of signal engineering and that answers, should we go down funnel or not? So I think that's just the general principle. Whether we should get into ML based signal engineering is one is answering the first part. The next is the kind of data you have, and do you have enough as well? So what we've typically found is it's quite rare that people have enough behavioral data tagged in their MMP. They usually have to go into something like a mixed panel, and the ML models are only as good as your data is. So again, if you're like a language learning app, do you have all the lessons tagged up? Do you have different tracks tagged up? Like all of this can become inputs. So I'd say that's how I kind of look at data. It's less to do with like number of users. It's more the number of conversions you're starting with to the ad platform.
Why do you need it in MMP? Are you still using the kind of MMP postbacks to the network to optimize?
The MMP is more from a measurement perspective. So
Okay.
the MMP is really more, one is, yes, the MMP data can feed into the ML model. So some people have enough behavioral data in the MMP, but the benefit of the MMP for signal engineering is purely measurement. So what we would do whenever we do signal engineering is we don't want to just blindly run it. We want to A/B test it. So we would have a campaign optimizing to start trial, and then we'd have a campaign optimizing to, let's say, this predictive subscriber event. And by having an MMP, that's how you can truly see like your day 30 ROAS for the start trial campaign versus the predictive signal campaign. And without an MMP, you wouldn't be able to answer that.
Got it. So it's not necessarily for the signal engineering side, but for the measurement and understanding of kind of our cohorted, ROAS,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah. And where the MMP can also help is it can also act as like the gateway for the signal itself. So there's again a couple of options for anyone doing signal engineering. You can either send these signals or server-side events directly to Meta using the conversion API, or you could send it to your MMP and then they would forward it to Meta. The benefit of it going through the MMP is you could, that one point can also forward it to TikTok. It could forward it to AppLovin, Liftoff, and all these other ad platforms as well. But both work in principle, but that's just another benefit of going through an MMP.
And I think that most people are recommending, like, with any decent level of spend or any sophistication, you should be using kind of conversion APIs. Is that right?
Not necessarily. I think there are like some more, again, structural challenges inside like how the MMP data goes to Meta. And this is just from experience having consulted and worked inside an MMP on the product team as well, like seeing like how fragile some of this can be. So that's where I think a lot of people have leaned on the conversion API as a bit of a fallback, as a workaround. But a lot of the times it is just configuration, like making sure the right parameters are passed into the MMP and the MMP configuration, there's certain requirements that Meta has for it to receive the data. So if you're hitting those requirements, then I'd say the MMP can be just as strong as a conversion API as well. Sometimes like people suggest a conversion API, again coming back to if you think of like scan and where there was a lot of like data loss, whereas I think with AEM, which is Facebook's kind of probabilistic approach to it, it negates quite a lot of that. So yeah, I've not seen significantly better improvement using conversion API versus running it through an MMP. I think they both have merit.
Maybe you can clarify something I don't fully understand. Other people I've seen talk about in terms of sometimes you're sending a conversion event immediately via SDK, but then you're sending additional data via API. Yeah, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes you don't have an option but to send it through the API, and that's like, again, if you think of trial converters, it doesn't happen while they're on the app. It happens from Apple or Google services. So if you think of revenue cat as an example, all of those events are server-side events, and I'd say they power a majority of people's conversion events in the MMP. So that's where there's a need for it to be sent later. And sometimes we have seen, depending on the MMP, those server-side events struggle a bit more to get matched. It's a little bit similar with Scan as well. Scan was like really struggled with server-side events just to do with the nature of when it sends it and also the parameters that get attached to it. So again, the MMPs have special relationships with Meta and the ad platform. So there's probably slightly different parameters that are getting passed through the MMP SDK versus if you just send it server-side. So that's typically where the challenges lie. And conversion API is just like another way to strengthen that server-side API, because you can send Meta like the email address, the user's phone number, if you have that information. Again, not every app business has that information, and not every business is comfortable forwarding that data as well.
And so you can some additional information that you may not have had at the initial conversion via the API at a later date. Also supplement it with more PII to kind of have better matching. And then like speed is pretty important too. Like just, I think there's, the probabilistic matching, AKA fingerprinting is also important if on time, because if you, it's the right understanding that essentially if you send an event very fast to Facebook, there are fewer possible conversion events that it could correlate to, so it's better matching. Where if you wait a couple days or hours, even that there's the matching is harder because there's more possible events it could correspond to.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it depends on like what method you're sending it through. So if you're sending it server side and it's relying on this probabilistic matching, there's typically fewer parameters for it to match on. So the longer that window is, the less likely it is to match. Whereas the client side, it just sends a lot more matching properties as well. So even if it comes a bit later, it's just got a lot more strength of the capability. So I think that speed aspect can help in two ways. One is from a matching perspective, but the other is just from an algorithmic feedback loop as well. So it just allows Meta to learn and optimize quicker, because if it's seeing that these purchases are always happening on day 7, it's almost waiting for 7 days after a click to know if this user was good. Whereas if you can send a quality signal within a day, for example, then Meta can quickly decide actually this user was a good user or not a good user, like immediately or within that day. So it just allows the algorithm to find users a bit quicker as well.
I think that's very helpful for people to understand. All right, so you've talked about I think it's some of your content about bigger apps being willing to accept longer payback periods, maybe like a 6 to 12 month payback in order to scale faster. How do we think about that maturity ladder, and when a team actually trust their numbers enough to make that bet? Of course, like money in the bank is always a big limiting factor as well, but how do you think about kind of that measurement maturity side?
Yeah, I think money in the bank is definitely a key aspect, or what kind of financing they have, if they've raised funding or got some user acquisition funding as well. So we typically find the indie developers who are bootstrapped, they're really pushing these annual subscriptions just because they don't have that later visibility, or the time to kind of recoup that investment is like they need that to be a lot shorter. This then gets into just more general LTV, which is again related to signal engineering, but more broader, looking at kind of cohorts as well. And you ultimately need historical data to go off of. And that's where it can become a bit shaky because the product is going to change. You might test different plans. So historical performance isn't always a future, the best indicator of future performance. So we have to be a bit careful. But typically, most of the curves of these these LTV curves, a lot of it is determined early on in the first kind of 1 or 2 months. So as long as you've got good visibility in that immediate short term, and it's just having enough buffer to know, okay, I'm going to monitor this for the first 45 to 60 days. If it's really off track, then I may want to scale back my spend. But you can computate that out to see, what do I think this is going to be worth. But I'd say, again, when people are waiting for it to recoup their investment, again, it depends on the type of subscription app as well. We definitely see like more of a push to annual, or people just looking to get the payback in like the first 60 days or 90 days. But even that is going beyond the bootstrap companies who want to recoup their investment in 7 days, for example.
And sometimes those faster payback periods can give you more rigor and kind of in your UA, overall process. That if you're really forced to have all your ads high performing, immediately you have faster feedback loops. You may still have making more money over time, and your ads may actually have better ROAS. So I've seen that sometimes even big companies really still have these very high bars for kind of payback, which can be helpful. But then if you're, I guess the flip side is if you're trying to grow a market and compete, sometimes it limits overall kind of reach and ability to scale.
Yeah, definitely. And that's when you do sometimes get back into this world of like blended versus direct CAC as well. Sometimes people, push towards blended just to kind of justify the spend. Sometimes it's required because if you just go on direct, there can be attribution issues that may force you to be too conservative, and you miss out on this halo effect, or Apple cannibalizing some of your Facebook ad performance as well. So yeah, it is a balancing act for sure.
And we're talking about that kind of predicted revenue for the future, and you can use for the first 30 days or 15 days, you can get some strong signals about what's going to happen because most of this activity or engagement or cancellations or renewals comes in pretty quickly. What are those the signals you're using to kind of build out the retention curve or renewal curve or revenue curve, for people that may want to do this themselves? Like what are kind of the easy inputs where you can build a pretty good model?
Yeah, I'd say for signal engineering, it's a lot more short term, and it's at a user level. So it can differ quite a lot from traditional LTV modeling, which looks more at cohorts. It may look at cohorts of users by week or by month, and then extrapolating that out. And that's a lot easier to be accurate. With signal engineering, sometimes it can be a pitfall as well if you try and be too accurate, because at an individual user level, that can be like really tricky to do. So yeah, so again, like I think you almost want to start by just grouping your users into those who do or do not convert, or those who into revenue buckets, or those who are worth X, Y, and Z in this time period, and just looking at behaviors they do. And there'll be some obvious ones like auto renewals being turned off early on, but then beyond that, if it's things like what behaviors they're doing, so there can be some low hanging fruit. But again, as we mentioned earlier, it can sometimes be a bit of a blunt tool. But I would almost say most of the times it would be better than just a start trial event.
Yeah, yeah. So looked out some revenue, see that, maybe look at your historical data, go, okay, we generally see 30% of people that are not going to renew turn off auto renew in the first 30 days. So by day 30, we can have a simple multiplier. And then maybe if get a little more advanced, we layer on some engagement. Okay, well, probably if they're never using our app, that decreases the probability to renew as well. And then you can kind of layer on kind of sophistication as you go to kind of get those predicted LTV.
Definitely. And another aspect can also be like onboarding questionnaires as well. Sometimes like a lot of apps are starting to capture age as well. And that can help because you might find different LTV based on age as well. So again, it can be like a simplistic way to start clustering LTV by user groups as well.
Cool. That's helpful. All right. So if a founder is listening right now, they're running some meta campaigns optimized to cost per trial with standard MMP setup. What's the very first thing they should change or try to do to improve performance?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just check the foundations are covered. So the first thing is like your match rate between meta and your MMP, like how different are those numbers? Because that might highlight like a more structural issue. And then the second is just aligning on what your cohorted ROAS or CAC period is going to be. Is it going to be 7 days, 10 days, 30 days, etc.? So that'll be the first thing. Just get that covered. Then I would say, yeah, you can test with some kind of higher quality trials. So if you're doing a trial today, think about a qualified trial. Could it be auto renewal? Could it be plus a specific event? But the key thing to note is just that volume aspect as well. Like, are you getting enough? Like, how far can you push it? And you could always apply this analysis on historical data. Just look at the last 30 days and say, if I was to apply this logic of a qualified trial, how many users would that reduce things by? And would it still meet the threshold for my budget? So that's the
how should we weigh off the trade-off between quality and quantity of signal? Where like is okay, so let's say we have 20 conversions per day, is maybe removing 30% of them because that's now our qualified trial, is that better, or is there at that quantity, like don't even bother, like you need to get way more quantity of conversions to Facebook, and that's always going to be the highest leverage improvement for a while? Or how do we think about that quantity versus quality of signal?
I'd say quantity kind of wanes off after anywhere between 10 to 20, 10 to 30 is a good sweet spot. So even if you're at 20, there's still an opportunity that 20-30% improvement of volume, like you're sending 20-30% less but getting high quality. I would definitely take that trade-off. And then the flip side, once you're getting past that 30-40 signals per day per campaign, that's when it's almost like you really should be optimizing your signal because you're leaving too much money on the table. So at that point, you want to bring it down. And then again, you can go through these iterations because hopefully this is then driving performance. So you can start scaling your spend. You'll start seeing this, qualified trial that you optimize for. Maybe now that qualified trial is getting to 30-40 signals a day, so we can go even deeper as well. So that's how I kind of see this evolution or iteration of when should you go further down funnel. And that's ultimately what signal engineering is. It's just going down funnel, but designing in a way where you go down funnel before the user's actually gone down funnel.
Yeah, because we need that. We don't have time to wait. We need that conversion signal fast, and so yeah, that makes sense. That's a really great framework to think about everything. Cool. Well, this was all the big questions I had. I've got a few last quick hits left for you, and so I would like if you have any hot takes that would annoy someone at a big MMP or ad network.
Um, I don't know if it would annoy people at an ad network. Maybe more for marketeers. I would say maybe two things is I think in 2026, we shouldn't be hiding behind attribution or measurement problems anymore. I think those days have passed us, or there's definitely solutions and workarounds. So I think everyone needs to have like strong measurement foundations. Now I don't think there's really an excuse not to. That'd be one, and then related again is maybe more for the marketeer than the ad networks. Again, is again, just be careful about hiding behind blended metrics, blended CAC, blended ROAS. Sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable as well. But again, in today's day and age, I think we can really focus on direct CAC. We know it may not be perfect, but it's if you've got your measurement in place, it's working strong enough for you to be able to rely on it.
Yeah, the easiest
And
person.
direct CAC will always be more expensive than blended, right? So
yeah. I was going to say the easiest person to lie to is yourself. Yeah. Cool. Those are great takes. And so, since this is a Price Power podcast, by Botsy, where we focused on AI pricing to optimize your revenue, have to ask, what's the most interesting win you've seen with pricing and packaging?
Yeah, I think monetization and pricing is still like a really underrated lever. Not enough teams, I think, are testing enough. A couple of the trends that I've seen recently that have been really interesting is like paid trials as well, which has been really interesting. Like, how do you do like a lower paid trial? And then the second is like knowing when should you offer that discount. So it's very common we see these like abandonment like discounts where as soon as someone presses the X on the paywall, they straight away get like a 50% discount. And again, you're probably best placed to know, when's the best time to surface this. But yeah, we've definitely seen like that taking a big share of subscriptions where why I mentioned, why start trials may not always be as strong, because you still get a big volume of people that see those discounts and say, you know what, I'll take a punt on 50% discount and just sign up now.
Yep. If generally, yes, showing a discount to every single person is suboptimal. If you can figure out the right people to discount to, right people to show different offers to, and yeah, I've seen that. I think some people are calling it like design your trial paywall, where you can pick a longer trial for a higher price, or a longer trial, but you pay for it like 99 cents or a few dollars. So yeah, I've seen that become kind of trendy recently. And yeah, some people told me it works. So yeah, those are great takes. Cool. Well, this was awesome. Amazing insights and kind of the nitty gritty of how to evolve your measurement layer and how to think about signal engineering. So yeah, really appreciate you joining.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Jacob.
And anything else you would like to promote? We can have everybody go to day 30 and reach out. We can link anything in the show notes you want. But yeah, anything else you'd like to promote to the audience?
Yeah, again, like we're still quite early stages as a company, and our number one goal, we're not like chasing revenue. For us, it's really like just validating this as much as possible and working with as many apps as possible. One of the ways we make this easy for everyone is we do these free signal audits as well, which we don't charge for. And that actually allows us to just check if those foundations are working. And also some of those frameworks I mentioned of precision and recall will like calculate that for people. So that's like our kind of easy way to just start getting into the world of signal engineering without thinking too much about investment.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's an amazing thing to offer people. And I know I just sent someone to you, and they said it didn't make sense at the time, but you gave amazing feedback and advice, and they really appreciate the guidance they told me. So even if it doesn't make sense to work with Day 30 today, Shumel will be amazingly helpful and happy to share his knowledge.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Please go to pricepowerpodcast.com to see all the episodes. Go to Spotify and YouTube and give us a subscribe and follow so you don't miss any episodes. All right, talk to you next time.